Hey guys, in today's video we're going to talk about wire connections. There's a ton of different methods to connect wires together. We're going to talk about them so that you can do a good job on your next install. So stay tuned. So in case you're unaware, there's more than one way to connect a wire to another wire. There's actually several, and what we've done is we've laid them out here. And today what we're going to do is we're going to go through and show you all the different ways that we could think of to possibly connect 2 or 3 wires together. We have good ones and we have bad ones and we have okay ones. You decide on which way works for you. So let's get started. So first up on our list is let's talk about butt connectors. There's a couple different types of butt connectors. These are your standard butt connectors. You have your marine butt connectors and you have your uninsulated butt connectors. So let's take a look at each one individually. As far as butt connectors go, you have different sizes. You have blues, you have reds, and then you have the more obscure ones that most people aren't aware of, which are these little yellow ones. These little yellow ones are new, and what they're great for is our industry, because you have these little tiny wires that you're trying to connect together. So now what you can do is take your little butt connector, put it on there. So it fits over the wire nice and tight. And you just crimp it on and you're good to go. In this case, we'll repeat the process on the other side. So what you have now is a nice connection, insulated, wires in there good and tight. You don't have a lot of girth to the wire, as opposed to if you were to like use one of these, where you run the risk of it pulling apart. So next you have the marine style connector. And what makes these, they're basically the same as the previous one, where you have a connection point in the center, but then these longer ends here are filled. This is basically shrink tubing with a like a silicone inside of it. So you take your wire, you crimp it, take your other wire, crimp it. So now, from the most part, that's just like the previous. So now what you want to do is take your torch, your heat gun, it's going to shrink the tubing down, as you can see before and after. These ends are thicker. Now they're going to stay sticky for a little while, but there's silicone that's come out of the end here. So now this is a waterproof connection. So next is going to be your uninsulated butt connectors. So what those require is some heat shrink. So these come in different sizes as well, depending on what size wire you're using. We'll go ahead and thread this bad boy on here. Alright, so now that we have it connected, what we want to do is pull it apart a little bit so that the copper is showing. Okay. The reason why we want to do that is we're going to solder this connector. So what we have now is a butt connector that has been soldered into the connector. So the last step we want to do is cover it with some shrink tubing. Okay, so we have our connection done. So next what we want to use is just good old solder. So we have our 2 wires here. We know we're going to need some heat shrink. So let's go ahead and thread the heat shrink through. Alright, now we want to twist the 2 wires together. Next on the list are Crimp Caps. What you do with a Crimp Cap is you simply take the 2 wires together, you twist them into a point like so. Put the crimp cap over the wire and crimp it. Next on the list are wire nuts. Now these are going to be my least favorite, and probably any installer that you talk to is least favorite. So essentially what you're doing is you're going to twist the wire together just like you do for the crimp cap. So you have 2 wires twisted together. You're going to take your wire nut and you're going to twist it over and keep twisting and pushing until it stops twisting, and just keep until basically the wires are twisted like this at the end. Yeah, this is probably the least one of the least recommended. I mean, yes, for safety it's okay. These are made for a house though. Houses don't move, cars do. These wires can not exactly always the best quality. Sometimes they fall off in the dash, they get caught when you're trying to pull a radio out, and then you have exposed wiring. So out of all the types, this is one for sure I would not recommend, but it is a way to connect two wires together, so we're showing it to you. Now, like crimp caps, we've seen some very interesting types of tape used for installation. There's nothing wrong with using tape if done properly. However, Scotch tape, blue tape, and duct tape aren't exactly the best way to connect two wires. I mean, sure, they'll work in a pinch, but you know, so you're gonna twist the two wires together, you're gonna wrap this stuff around it like this, and then you're gonna expect this to stay on while you jam it into the dash, or put it underneath a piece of carpet or whatever. Now, these things barely stick to Christmas presents, let alone two wires that are gonna be in the hot sun. So, strongly do not use these types of installs. Yeah, sure, if you're just testing something out and the only thing you can find is a piece of Scotch tape, rock on. But otherwise, no, stay as far away from these types of tapes as possible. Now, here are some tapes that you can use for installation. You have your Scotch Super 33 tape, and you have your tesa automotive tapes. These are great for automotive use. They still don't exactly have the heat capability as, let's say, heat shrink, but they will work, and we'll show you how to use them so that they don't unravel or anything like that. Now, when do you use these? If you're putting a radio in, buy some heat shrink. I mean, do this type of connection where you buy some heat shrink. You can pick up heat shrink extremely cheap. Though, yes, you can solder the wire and wrap it in tape. Buy the heat shrink. When do you want to use this stuff? In a position where you can't get heat shrink on the wire because you don't want to, let's say, cut the wire. So what do I mean? A very common type of installation that we do is called the poke and wrap. Now, the poke and wrap basically involves you taking your wire strippers and you're stripping the wire apart there. Okay, then you take a pick tool and you poke into the wire so you have a nice circle. Okay, now you take your new wire that you need to introduce into the car, you put it through the hole, you pinch, and then you wrap the wire around. Okay, so basically what you've done is you've made this cool Y where your wire is added into their wire. Now, this is where the debate ensues. Should you solder it or should you not solder it? Depending on the thickness of the factory wire and what it is going to, you may not want to solder it because moving the heat down the wire could cause issues in the car. Now, if we're just talking like tapping into a cigarette lighter, by all means, or a speaker wire or anything like that, that you know heat is really not going to affect the wire, go ahead and solder it. So in this case, we'll go ahead and solder. Now, as always, anytime you introduce a soldering gun into a car, take precautions not to drip hot solder anywhere on the upholstery of the car. That really sucks. Alright, so now that you've got this, and you've got it nice in there, alright, what you want to do is flatten out the wires as much as you can. Now, if you're using the Super 33 or the tesa tape, it's pretty much the same thing. Go ahead and get yourself a piece. 3 to 4 inches is usually plenty. Start at one end where you're exposed like this, so you can still see that, and then wrap it, and then start twisting. Now, you want to kind of twist and pull, but not pull too much because you don't want to shrink up the tape. But you want to make sure you get it nice and tight on there so that it's tight like that. Okay, so that's real tight. Now, if you live up north and it really doesn't get hot, at this point you're pretty much done. But if you live down here in the south where it does get hot, what you may want to do is take 2 zip ties. These are the little 4-inch guys. And do this. Now, what this is going to do is this is going to make sure that tape doesn't unravel for any reason. This is also nice is if you didn't do the solder, this will hold the wires together so that they won't get pulled. So in either case, this is the zip ties are really nice. We always add them we add two, one at the beginning of the wrap and one at the end of the wrap so that the tape doesn't unravel. So next up for joining two wires are these guys here. These are T-taps. They also make Scotch locks, and there's a new twist lock. You wrap it around the wire like this, you hold it. They do make an actual tool, but for this case you can just use needle nose and you squeeze until you hear the snap. Now what that's done is that's gone ahead and it's got these cool little teeth. So it has this cool little tooth right here, and what that does is that squeezes the wire between it so that you can make the connection. If you notice, that is a really thin gap. So depending on the color of the T-tap is the width of the gap. So here's a red, it's a very thin gap. Here's a yellow, and it's a thicker gap. Now essentially what you've just done is you've taken two knife blades to pierce through this external shielding to get to the copper inside. So let's pop this guy off. So as you can see now, the wire has been cut. Some of the copper is cut as well, but it's a connection that is, it's available to you. This is going to really weaken this piece of wire over time if it's in like a door or someplace that moves or someplace where there's water and it could corrode. This is basically just going to fall apart. So there is one more type of connection, which are single end connections, meaning like a ring terminal, a bullet, a fork terminal, or different size ring terminals. Now what these do is these go on the end of the wire to do a specific task. Like you might use a fork terminal to go into an amp. Obviously a ring terminal could be for a ground. You could use something like this for a quick disconnect. So what you want to do is, depending on the type you use, you have insulated and non-insulated. So if you're using an insulated, you can always turn it into a non-insulated by simply removing the insulation. So once you've pulled that off, so now what you end up with is a nice non-insulated fork terminal. Now what you want to do is put it onto the wire. So now at this point you could be done. This wire is fine. Put some heat shrink over it, call it a day. Or you can also come in with a soldering gun and apply some solder to the end here. At this point you could go ahead and put your heat shrink on the end. You've got a really solid connection. You don't have to worry about it ever coming loose or the wire pulling out or anything like that. Now last but not least, of course, is this guy here. Yes, you might think it's funny. It is bubble gum. And yes, we've seen this before. Not necessarily bubble gum, but there's those cool putties that you can mix together into a ball, and they say they make waterproof connections. Very similar to the texture of bubble gum, but it dries hard. No, don't use those. They're wire, man. Just no. So, no on the bubble gum. Hey guys, we hope this helps you out. So when you go to do your next project, you do great wire termination. If you like our videos, please subscribe. If you want to find us elsewhere, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course right here on YouTube. Otherwise, you guys have a great night, and we will see you later next time. Bye. Hey guys, on today's show, we're going to talk about wire termination. There's a ton of different methods. There's a ton of different methods. Jesus. Good. Yeah. To do your installation a little bit better. Fuck. Got so close.